Welcome into Jets Nation Radio, sponsored by Betway. Make sure you like and subscribe to Jets Nation Radio so you never miss a podcast. Welcome into Jets Nation Radio. I'm Angus. Hout, as always, our podcast brought to you by Betway. So be sure to check out the latest NHL odds with online sportsbook Betway. Ray, how's it going there?
It's going pretty good, except we got some major
Harp?
rumblings out of the Jets organization, so
Yeah,
not
it's
so good, I guess.
yeah, yeah, you're absolutely right. So Connor Hellebuyck saying he's not going to extend in Winnipeg. Dubois, same thing. He won't even play here next year. And we've got Scheifele and Wheeler in the top 25 of the Daily Faceoff trade bait board. Like, yikes! This is going to be a big season big off season for Kevin Cheveldayoff, Mark SChiefele, and the rest of the organization.
I want to ask, when do you think the last time a team has seen three players in the top four of the trade bait board going into the offseason?
I
Because
want to
I
say
don't think that's ever happened almost.
I was gonna ask you the same thing, but I was gonna say, like, wasn't it Dubois, Scheifele, and Wheeler last summer in the top 25?
Yeah, in the top 25, yeah, but I don't think we've ever seen a situation where a team has three players of the top four of the trade bait board. So
Yeah. So I mean, go Winnipeg for making some noise out here, because yeah, no one else is gonna be talking about this kind of a summer that I know of. And it's a little bit frustrating because, like, well, we've already seen a couple of trades, and normally we don't hear about trades during the Stanley Cup Finals, but we had that three-way trade with Columbus, Philly, and LA earlier this week. And you kind of wonder, does that open up enough room for Connor Hellebuyck in LA?
yeah, I think it has to. Like, they open up space to sign Gavrikov long or like somewhat long term to a 2 year extension, so they keep that asset that they traded for, but they also got out a good amount of cap. So you got to think that if they're trying to like make their team over the top, that Hellebuck has to be one of their number one targets right now, and it just makes a lot of sense that way.
Absolutely. And I mean, like, LA is like, you got to take on Connor McDavid. So if you got Connor Hellebuyck in there and maybe even a Pierre-Luc Dubois who loves to just be an absolute recluse, like, the Cheveldayoff and the organization have said, well, we don't want to do a rebuild, but like, you could just take what LA's done and just, I don't know, speed up the rebuild, I guess. Like, you'd only have a year of like one bad rebuild, I guess. 1 year of a bad rebuild.
Yeah, I just think that like when I think of teams rushing rebuilds, I think of the New York Rangers when in that like 2018-17 season when they traded for Trouba and they signed Panarin. And it's like, sure, you can like accelerate your rebuild, but is it ultimately always the best decision to do that? Like kind of risk versus reward on that, where you become a competitive team sooner, but if you just stay the course, you might be a better team for a longer period of time. So I think that the Jets next season is going to be an interesting season to watch.
Oh yeah, it's
Yeah.
like this off season. Like, yeah, we wonder, like, are we going to lose all four of these core pieces? And I was talking to a colleague at Rogers who he said not to drop his name, so I'm a little bit annoyed about that. But he is saying, like, you could expect all four guys to be gone, but don't be shocked if they're all sticking around at the end of this offseason. I think I honestly wouldn't be shocked if Mark SChiefele and Cheveldayoff had the brilliant idea of, like, you know what? We'll get rid of Dubois and Hellebuyck, but we're going to keep Mark Scheifele and Blake Wheeler around. We believe in those boys. I would not be shocked if that's the way that we ran it back with the Winnipeg Jets
Yeah.
this offseason.
Yeah. And to that point, like I think I remember listening in on there was an interview on a podcast with Dylan Sandberg, and he was mentioning how in the NHL, like even just in any league that you're in, you're not going to have the same group of players every year. There's going to be changes made. And I think that a lot of players included, like with that, like Morgan Barron as well, like these young players on the team kind of recognize that, yeah, I think that there's going to be some major shakeups. And ultimately, it's going to be a year where these young guys like Sandberg and Barron are going to be able to get a lot more responsibility on this team going forward, which is really great to see.
Yeah, I really wish that they would blow up that core and like just let them all four of those guys go and let your Dylan Sandbergs, your Adam Lowry, like like these guys aren't necessarily old by any means, and obviously Morgan Barron and Dylan Sandberg far younger than Lowry and Morrissey. But if you allow these young guys to step up into leadership roles early on, like you could have tremendous success in Winnipeg and maybe even argue that guys might want to stick around Winnipeg because I am sick and tired of no one wants to
Yeah.
play in Winnipeg.
Yeah, and I think that like a team with Winnipeg, like if it shows that like they're giving their young guys a chance, like giving Sandberg an extended role, you see Barron almost maybe even on a second line if the team blows up in a bit. And like a team like that, like a lot of people are gonna be like, yeah, there's a lot of opportunity to like there's opportunity here. Like not a lot of teams are gonna have options for those younger players to kind of get a bigger opportunity. Like they might just be subject to like a fourth line, third line role. Like on the Jets, like they might get elevated minutes, and like I feel like having that kind of attraction there where you can say like, hey yo, like you can come here, you can get some ice time that you probably wouldn't get elsewhere, and like you benefit, we benefit. And it's like I feel like that's a way that it will be more attractive for the younger generation of hockey players, and thus kind of changing that narrative as well.
Well, and you have Rick Bonus, who is, there's usually one guy on a team who doesn't like Rick Bonus, but for the most part, you only hear positive things about Rick Bonus and young players. And, you've got the perfect coach for that to lead a young group of guys. If you can get rid of the toxicity and let the young guys really breathe. And I think that's the one thing the Jets need to do is let those young guys truly breathe and get that ice time. But, that's only if we see the core actually move out and we don't bring in unnecessary ads, I guess. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Like I think that the Jets in a way like they can't just like go about it where they just give the ice time to young players because like they still have to earn those minutes. They have to show that like hey, like if you get like that's like a kind of responsibility aspect where you give this person more minutes, like you're not just going to give them more minutes just because. We saw that with Heinola and stuff like that. Like you got to go into these roles and earn the minutes, but I think that we've seen from like at least with Barron and Sandberg, where these guys have done really great in their rookie seasons, like their full rookie seasons almost, and like being able to kind of let these players become the best versions of themselves rather than kind of like if you don't give Barron like second line time, like you might not be able to see like, hey, this guy can be like maybe a 40-point scorer if he's in the right circumstance. And like you might see Sandberg and be like, this guy could potentially be on a power play if it comes down to it. So I think giving these guys ice time and like the opportunity is the biggest thing for the Jets. And I think that like with that opportunity, like you see these young players expanding on what might like you might see for them today, but it can be very expanded into the future.
And I think you build a more loyal fan base when it comes to having a couple of bad years. Like I know like the Jets, the early on years that, you could sell tickets to whoever and the Jets were bad, but do that again. And I honestly think that would benefit the city to have that kind of a team because like you lose Connor Hellebuyck, like unless you're getting unless Corpusalo re-signs with LA and expects a trade to Winnipeg, there's not a goalie I see coming to Winnipeg to really bail us out. Do you?
Yeah, I don't think there's really like gonna be a goalie that can be a replacement to Hellebuyck because like Hellebuck's a top five goalie in the league,
Yeah.
and we've seen how important he is to the team. So I think I saw this on Twitter as well. It's like the team doesn't really want to like do a full rebuild or like kind of do that kind of process, but like I don't think it's real. Like you can want to not do that, but when you're trading away someone of Hellebuck's importance to your success, I don't think you fully have full control over that kind of aspect of where your organization goes.
Well, and especially when it's like you're only replacing your forward talent. Like there's how many defensemen are going to get traded from the Jets this year? Probably zero.
Yeah, I'd say maybe one defenseman could probably be
Yeah, like
seen being moved,
maybe
but
as a part of a package, but like really, I like no defensemen are moving in or out. And so it's just like he if you're going to get better defensively, like Connor Hellebuyck's obviously not the issue, so they would have to move pieces out. Otherwise, we're gonna again just look at subpar goaltending where we get David Rittich and someone to bail us out. Who, are we gonna see sub 800 or sub 900 goaltending all season long? Like we might be seeing that for the first time, in
Yeah.
a long time with the Jets.
Yeah, you never know how good you have it with Hellebuck until you have the rumors of him not being your goaltender anymore, and just kind of the harsh reality of what other teams have to go through with goaltending sometimes, where your goaltender is not always reliable, and like you just kind of have those games where like, yeah, I don't really like why are they starting that goalie? Like when they start Hellebuck, you don't really question them starting Hellebuck, but when you have other goaltenders like in other organizations, and how we're probably gonna have a new kind of tandem next year, it's gonna be like, damn, we had it good with Hellebuck.
We really did. And I still can't believe there were people out there who are like, nope, all of these losses, they're Connor Hellebuck's fault. That guy's a bum. Like, those people blow my mind. And yeah, they're going to get a rude awakening this upcoming season.
Yeah,
Pierre-Luc Dubois. I don't know how you feel about the French there,
yeah.
Ray, but I'm an OG Albertan, and sometimes I hate the French, especially with equalization payments and when their players are a little bit soft in my city. So Pierre-Luc Dubois got a list of 5 to 6 teams that he'd be willing to sign an 8-year deal with. How do the Jets do in this trade, and are they going to be pulling off a win or a loss?
Yeah, I think that like it's gonna be a really just bad situation. Like we've kind of had this situation since the Colorado playoffs where he was gonna test UFA. The situation kind of changed a little bit where at least he's not gonna walk himself to UFA, so the Jets can still get something for him. I think they're gonna do okay in the trade, like from where they are in this situation. But ultimately, when you think of the methods on how we got to this point and how Dubois got to this team, we're talking about Jack Roslovic and Patrick Laine, who are major aspects of this team, and now we turned those assets into Dubois, and now we're gonna turn Dubois into probably an assortment of stuff that is nowhere near what you would realistically want for him, because we both know that Dubois, when he's on his game, like could be like a 70-point center that's plays a really good physical game, two-way, and it's just kind of like a Matthew Tkachuk light almost, where like he isn't going to be putting up 100 points, he isn't going to be the most like impactful in every single game, but he plays that similar style, and that kind of style is kind of dying from the game almost, where it's a lot more skill and speed. So I think they're definitely going to lose this trade, and I wouldn't be surprised to see Dubois have a spike in his performance on another team. But ultimately, like he is going to be like 25, so we might be seeing somewhat of a finished product with Dubois. But like Dubois is just a great player, and it sucks to be losing him on the team.
Yeah, it really does. And like that one really hurts because like Dubois brings almost a Winnipeg style of game to the ice, game in and game out. Like I talked to, at least I think I talked about this with somebody at some point this last week, but he's blue collar, he's chippy, he's mean, but he's also skilled. Like no one talks about how much skill he actually has. Like you watch his passing, like it's just on point, and just this certain grittiness that he brings to the ice. I love Pierre-Luc Dubois, the hockey player. And like the same thing with Blake Wheeler, just on that same level of wow, like this city deserves you and you deserve this city. But yeah, Pierre-Luc Dubois, we're losing that guy, and it doesn't matter what the assortment is. It sucks that we lost him. I still think that the Jets ultimately won the Pierre-Luc Dubois Laine Roslovic trade, like initially, but with him leaving, yeah, it's just a big bummer. And um, it's going to be hard because there's not many power forwards in the NHL. I don't think we'll ever see the elimination of the power forward because everyone loves the guy who can skate hard, beat somebody up, run his mouth, and also go get you points on a regular basis. And, and Dubois is not a half bad centerman. Not great, but not half bad.
Yeah, and I think that one good thing of note is that even though we might be losing Dubois, like we can't go without saying that like we are going to get something back for him. Like we're going to get maybe like a draft pick and some prospects, maybe a hockey trade with another swap. So like it's not like we're completely screwed in this situation where he's absolutely going for nothing. But also looking at the prospect system, we kind of have our own Dubois kind of caliber like physical player and Wrecker McGroarty coming up. So having that kind of I think that type of player is like one of those players that every team kind of wants in their system where like just having one of those players that kind of goes in on a physical presence every game and kind of gives it their all, like I think can't be eliminated from the game completely because of how important that role is to a hockey team.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, like the one thing I think we should all recognize with power forwards like that, like Jerome again, like he took a while before he was established in the league. Pierre-Luc Dubois, same thing. And Rutger McGroarty, going to take a few years before he's at that point where he's a stud. But I think by the time he's 24, 25, like you watch out, the Jets are going to have a madman on their team. And especially if Adam Lowry's kicking around and like giving him some guidance too. Like that's a future pair I want to see, even if it only lasts for a season, because Larry's going to be pretty old at that point.
Yeah.
Okay, so but like I've heard three teams come up with Pierre-Luc Dubois. We've got Montreal, Minnesota, and the Rangers. Have you heard
Yeah.
anything? Any other teams?
I've heard one other team in LA where
Okay.
they think, or like basically the idea around there is Kopitar isn't really getting any younger. So maybe LA really wants to make a massive splash and maybe acquire both Dubois and Hellebuyck. I'm not sure how that trade would work
I
or
think they
if
would
that's
have to
something that
sell
would,
their farm on that.
yeah. So it might be really expensive, so they might not do that kind of trade. But I think Dubois in that kind of situation there in LA would be also a pretty good fit there as well.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I totally agree with that one. Uh I just personally, I just couldn't imagine paying the taxes in LA or in California. Like I would, as a hockey player, I'd be so miffed about it. Like, really, I got to pay all this tax on that. But I know taxes suck here in Canada as well. So yay, taxes. Is there what kind of like what kind of ideal trade like of those four teams would you like to see? Because I've seen a couple where guys are like, oh, they should get Capo Caco from the Rangers and a first rounder, and just like kind of like I've seen a lot of Rangers talk.
Yeah, I think that like the Rangers one like that like could probably be like Filipino. He's a pretty good middle six player there that just got signed to like a 4-year extension. So that kind of term is there with him. And
Mm-hmm.
then getting like Capo Caco and a first round pick, like that could definitely work for both teams. And like yes, like Capo Caco hasn't exactly lived up to what has been thought of him. But again, it's a second overall pick who's a Finnish player who did really good in his draft year. That kind of rings some bells with someone that got traded out for Dubois. So kind of that would be a great kind of like trade where you could see a lot of upside. Like you could see like it's not like you're getting like a finished product. Like you can see someone improve. You can see someone in a different circumstance where New York's development system inherently hasn't been that great. So maybe even if you can try to get Lafreniere if they're willing to trade Lafreniere before Kako. And yeah, and like Minnesota again, they have a lot of cap issues going forward with those buyouts. So
Yeah,
I'm
I
not
don't.
sure how it would work for them, but if it's important enough for them to get Dubois and he is on their list, I wouldn't be surprised if they find some way to make the cap work with like Ryan Hartman and Felina with like Rossi or like a first round pick.
Okay. Yeah, I was just like, how the hell would Minnesota make this happen? But Bill Guerin will, he's been a magic man out there.
Yeah.
So, I was gonna go somewhere with Lafreniere, and now I can't remember where I was gonna go with that. But you think Lafreniere would like? Actually, that's what I was gonna say. The Jets, they've managed to snag a couple of guys from the Rangers, and like Pionk and Barron, like they've just blossomed into such good players. Like Pionk, when he's healthy, that guy is a pretty damn good defenseman for this
Yeah.
team.
Yeah, I think that the Jets have done a really good job, at least in the New York Rangers franchise, in identifying guys that maybe the New York Rangers don't value as highly. Like we saw in Barron, where he was almost kind of just like that prospect that was added to the Andrew Kopp deal. And like not a lot of people were like, oh, like they got Barron in this deal too. Like it's a massive kind of thing on top of that deal. And the same thing with Pionk, where Pionk was like in his like second season and seen as like a lot of defensive issues and kind of like a really raw product. But the Jets were able to turn those assets into very productive assets on their team. Pionk being a very capable top four defenseman when he's not a chaos agent, and you have Barron who could probably be a really great third line guy and like a warrior taking a skate to the face. Like those types of players, like on the Rangers, like if the Rangers keep those guys, are they going to become the players they are today? I don't really think so because they wouldn't fully get the opportunity. So
That's rough.
getting someone like Kako or Lafreniere, like sure they haven't been up to where they would want to be in their career right now, but like you could definitely see like if Lafreniere or Kako get here, like if they get the right ice time, like a second round or second line ice time with some power play time, like I wouldn't be surprised to see them both, like either of them, whichever, if either get added to the deal, get like 50 plus points at least.
Yeah. Oh, I'll take it. And if you could get two pieces for Dubois, and they might not be sexy pieces, I'll still take two pieces. I'll believe in those boys until the cows come home and or they
Yeah.
absolutely suck. And we're gonna hate Pierre-Luc Dubois for a long time. And that's gonna be nice to boo that guy. Um, but speaking of guys that you kind of want to hate, Pat Brisson, who is Pierre-Luc Dubois' agent, do you think he wants to facilitate a trade between the Jets and whoever? Do you think he's done more positive in the Dubois situation or more negative?
I think that he's done a lot of negative in that sense where he's kind of, instead of like kind of having that behind the closed doors of like, hey, like my player probably doesn't want to sign long term here, like let's look at kind of some of these options so Chevy doesn't have that pressure on him. Like especially when he said about like Montreal being a place he'd play, like I know a lot of Montreal fans probably boomed their brains seeing like, oh my God, he wants to play here, and like the situation wasn't fully known. And I think that really affected some teams around the league where like, oh, he's probably going to go to Montreal. Like, what's the point in us trading for him when he wants to go home and play in Quebec? So it's like, I think that he's trying to almost like help in the fact that like, hey, I kind of put the Jets into a difficult situation with my player where like they traded for this guy, they believed in him, but my player doesn't really want to play here. So, and I've made it known that this player doesn't want to play here. So I think he's trying to help them out in a way where he's helping out his player get to another team, but he's also helping the Jets kind of find the team that best suits the Jets for a trade, but also a team that Dubois would sign. So he's definitely done some positive, or he's going to be doing some positives of late. But I can't understate how like him saying about different teams that he would see Dubois playing in kind of affected Dubois' value and other teams' perception of where Dubois would play.
Yeah, and honestly, I think it hurt Pierre-Luc Dubois' bottom line as well. Like they could have kept this all behind closed doors, and Dubois could have been selling jerseys left, right, and center, and and then taken off and taken the hellstorm from there then, and not been in talks all season long.
Yeah. And I think that really also affected his like image, like even just by fans. Like you see that like his shift in Columbus where like you see him kind of quitting on that team and now him saying that he wants out of Winnipeg. Like I think a lot of people may think that he has some sort of like character issue or some type of thing going on where he isn't as attractive as an asset because he's wanting to move so much. Like I think that some people might think like, oh, he's gonna get traded to my team, and then 2 years in, he's gonna be like, oh, I don't really want to play here anymore, and kind of quit again. So I think that with that, he kind of affected his own trade value negatively as well.
Yeah, he really did. And I mean, like the grass is always greener on the other side of the fence, right? Like I moved to Winnipeg from Alberta, and the if you're just mad about the cold or mad about how it looks or just even the vibe of the city, like I don't know, I kind of like it here a little bit better than anywhere else. Like it's Yeah, the people are a little rowdy, but for the most part, it's a good place to live. So, but again, if you've only lived in Columbus and Winnipeg, you kind of look around the league and you're like, oh, this place is far nicer than here. So, like, I kind of get the same vibe of like when players visit here in Winnipeg, they're kind of like they only see downtown. Where I kind of get the same vibe of you travel to anywhere else in the league, you just see downtown, or they're quick amenities and net whatever's going on in the city. Uh because like the golf dome here is closed up all season long, but you get to go play golf in Arizona for a weekend. Well, you don't get to, I don't know if you get that opportunity as much if you're living down there or living in New York and doing the nightlife, or LA and doing whatever down
Yeah.
there. So I don't know, you're just here to work, man.
Yeah, and I think that like that was like we know that that was like a reason why Dubois wanted out, where he could control where he wanted to go and kind of the non-ice on ice stuff, like kind of the nightlife or kind of like the life around the city more. But I think it's important to note that like with like I'm gonna go back to Pionk on this, like where Pionk played in New York, like he chose New York to sign with after his college career because they were short on right hand D. But then he got traded to the Jets, and the first thing he says that like it's a great hockey town, and like the city is amazing for its hockey, and like the city is electric when it comes to its hockey and its kind of dedication to their team. And I think that a lot of people underestimate how important that is. And like even though Winnipeg might be not the biggest market in this league, doesn't mean that it isn't a good place to play hockey.
Yeah, it's a great community. Like when people say it's a small town vibe in a big city, they're absolutely true. Nino Niederreiter donated his signed and donated a jersey to the Children's Rehab Foundation. I was just at an event this morning, and it just like, and he's another guy that talked highly of the community. Sam Gagne, like the list goes on and on. Like you really can't undervalue a team that takes care of their guys.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, with the amount of chance coming up, hold on. Sorry. Maybe we should do a quick ad read for our good friends at Betway Reset. So be sure to check out the latest NHL odds with online sportsbook Betway. Getting back to the questions, Jets have made it clear, even though key players are leaving, that they don't have an appetite for a rebuild. Where do you predict the Jets will finish next year prior to any moves made?
Uh, I think that they're probably going to be slightly worse than they were last year, like probably in that like 12 range, like probably like fifth or sixth in the Central, depending on how St. Louis kind of adapts. But it's going to be
Are
like
we
the
assuming
set.
that Chicago's immediately going to jump into like third place with Bedard?
No, I think they're probably still going to be behind the Jets in seventh. Like I still think that the bottom two teams are probably going to be Arizona and Chicago. But I think that like that sixth spot is basically going to be like it's probably going to be the same three teams in the same spot for positions 4 through 6 with Nashville, St. Louis, and Winnipeg. And I could see the Jets finishing any of those positions depending on the moves they make. So I think my prediction now, because we could always compare this to like future when trades are made and when the roster is fully known. So I'm gonna say for the time being that they're gonna finish sixth. I'm wrong. I am hoping that they're slightly better than this, probably fifth maybe. But like again, like the Central is one of the most competitive divisions, probably right beside the Metro there. Like it's a really competitive division, and like even Arizona, like a lot of people have been mentioning Arizona in interviews where like they give it their all regardless. Like they're not gonna make it easy on you, and they still have things to play for. They have a team that they want to make better. And like I think the Jets are just a team that like I don't know. They're a team that they're gonna be trading away major assets. They're gonna want to be good, but it's hard to be really good when you're trading away your best ass like your like probably like your three best assets almost. And it's like Hellebuyck is just going to be too hard to replace.
Yeah, and that's the one thing that gets me is like there's no way they hold on to Connor Hellebuyck for one more kick at the can. There's just no logical way that you don't trade that guy. So like, and there's so much of me that's like, you know what? They're gonna sneak in. They're gonna be the last wild card spot, but they're gonna do it. They're gonna make the playoffs. There's also some of me that's just like, no Connor Hellebuyck. We're gonna be probably sitting around Chicago next year and probably be fighting for not last in the league.
Yeah. It's like it's really hard to predict because like for how long we've had Hellebuyck and how many games he's played, like it's almost like inconceivable how to predict how their next season will go because you don't know what goalie they're gonna have. You don't know like if like all four of the trade bait boards are gonna be traded. So it's like it's so difficult to kind of like you could almost say that they could almost even be like better than this year, kind of like how Columbus where they like they were a team that like had a lot of action when they had their kind of blow up and lost Panarin and Bobrovsky and Duchesne. Like that team, like they it's kind of the epiphany of what the Jets would do if they kept all these assets and kind of ran it back, and then they would lose them. But then Columbus then goes next year, and then they beat Toronto in the play-in round. It's like they saw success, even though their team kind of went through major shifts, and it's going to be really interesting to see what type of moves they make and what if those moves are garnered towards making the playoffs next year or if it's kind of more of a long-term plan.
Didn't Columbus lose in the first round to Tampa Bay right after the
Yeah.
play-in round? So I don't know. Like that's
Yeah.
that I
They
like
still made the playoffs though. Like no one had them in the playoffs.
I guess so. That's very true because they were supposed to be like the dead last team that year. I do remember
Yeah.
that, but yeah, maybe maybe you play it like the Vegas Golden Knights in their first year where everyone's kind of like, yeah, you guys aren't going to make it this year and really you guys aren't going to do a whole lot and then all of a sudden you're running for the cup. But again, you have to see the nuts on Cheveldayoff being willing to do this and Mark Shipman again allegedly is right in the ear of Kevin Cheveldayoff. So if he's being a disruptive owner, he's got to stop that. And yeah, Cheveldayoff has to grow a backbone and then start making some moves. Like I've said, like we've talked about it. He wins trade, so he can go do that. He just has to do what he needs to do rather than let it be.
Yeah, and I think that like it'd be really interesting to see what Kevin Cheveldayoff could do if he didn't kind of like if he didn't have that kind of ear of ownership or something like that. Like
Mhm.
if he had like full control, what like would be different almost. Like Cheveldayoff wins a lot of the trades and is a very patient GM, but I kind of wonder like what the team could be like with either one of a different ownership or different management. Like I think that both like would kind of very differently impact how the team looks. And I think that like even like I think we've mentioned this in the past where like if Cheveldayoff doesn't adapt to what the team needs in trading these guys, like if Cheveldayoff like if we should look at different GM options, it's like sure like a different GM would be nice to kind of have a new voice, but ultimately is if ownership's still kind of having that impact on kind of in the ear of the GM and maybe like kind of like pushing for certain players to get signed or pushing for certain players to move out and stuff like that. Like, is there really going to be that drastic of a change if we move from Cheveldayoff? Probably not.
No, it's if you have Chipman in someone's ear, and as long as they're willing to say, yes, boss, we can get, we can make sure that we've got all these really good, forwards that don't do anything defensively. And like, I'm not trying to knock anyone right now specifically, but like, you see that a lot with the Jets forwards. And it's just a guy that doesn't fully understand the game. Cause it's like, if I tried to make a team, it would look very similar. It's like, this is perfect, but my team would be consistently either just making the playoffs or just missing because I don't understand hockey as well as somebody like yourself or somebody like Kevin Cheveldayoff. There's GMs for a reason, so owners just need to back off.
Yeah, the owner needs to be the owner. The general manager
Yeah,
needs to be the general manager.
and
And
go
like,
to be a fan. Like if you're an owner, go all out. Be like Mark Cuban and just like love your team, but love the guys that your GM has brought in.
yeah,
Yeah. Um, this is actually a really good question on your part. What's changed from the 2018 season to, basically we have the same team. The defense is, swapped in and out, but why is this team no longer a contender?
I think that question's like pretty deep where like you've seen them make really big improvements. Like you go back and look at that 2018 or not cup team, like the conference team,
Mm-hmm.
and like they had Brian Little on that team as like kind of like that second line guy before they brought in Stastny. And like they had Linus still on the team. They had a lot of young guys. And I think the biggest difference is within that kind of 5 year period, we saw in that 2018 how important the entry level contracts were for that team and like creating a team that was very competitive. We had Line on an ELC. We had Ehlers just kind of coming off his ELC, so he might have been being paid. I'm not sure exactly. And we had Connor on his ELC, and like Morrissey was being paid pretty cheap. We had Trouba being paid cheap, and it's like I think that within those 5 years, we didn't find a way to adapt and find ways to kind of recreate that with kind of bringing in those rookies or cheap deals that would really boost up our team. Like we kept a lot of the same players, but now we're paying those players, and paying those players means you can't use that cap space elsewhere. So I'm not saying that the players aren't worth the cap that they are, but like having Kyle Connor at 900K rather than making 7 million, you can really use that 7 million to bring in like a defenseman or bring in a lot of other assets. Like, and we saw that with Stastny. So I think that the main reason why they're no longer a contender is the fact that they weren't able to adapt to being able to use more of those ELC type contracts that provide great benefit.
Yeah, like everyone just kind of grew up, and then all of a sudden, yeah, you got to pay them their big dollars. Nikolai Ehlers in that 2018 run was 900,000,
Oh,
894 to be exact. So if you're ever looking for trivia, looking for exact dollars there.
yeah. So that's Ehlers, Line.
Uh, KC would have been
Yeah.
under.
Morrissey was also probably pretty cheap as
Yeah, but
well.
you had Dustin Bufflin. He making a
Yeah,
like he
yeah,
was
he's
making
paying
good money,
7.6. Yeah,
but like again, that's reasonable money for a guy like Dustin Bufflin. Like if legitimately, as long as your defensemen, in my opinion, are making less than $8 million each, I genuinely believe that you'll be fine. Like if you have one $8 million guy, that's kind of where I would be building my team around.
Morrissey was also 800K during
Yeah.
that season as well.
So
So
everyone was being paid next to nothing as like, yeah, you just had to pay who really? Wheeler?
Wheeler, Wheeler, probably Shifley.
Shifley. Yeah, that
I think
was
Hellebuyck was also probably cheap that year too as well.
yeah. Like that was only he would have been just a few years out. So I don't know
Yeah,
who
he
they
was
were
making
paying
two
at that
million.
point.
They're
Wild.
paying Brian Little.
God bless Brian Little. Did you know that he's a triathlete now and like
Yeah,
racking up decent numbers. Like he's getting famous within the triathlon world. So good for Brian Little. I think I talked about that last
yeah, yeah.
week. Um yeah. Oh, that's not a question for the podcast. That's a question for me. You know what? I think that's everything there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, man. This week has been
yeah.
weird. Like just the Jets, like everyone asking out. And I'm curious, are we going to see more RFAs doing what Dubois is doing, especially like Canadian RFAs?
I think that like I think the game's really changing a lot where you see it with like Matthews and Dubois and like these players like what used to happen was like you would have an ELC and after that ELC you would kind of sign that like 8 year like long-term deal and kind of have that kind of security. But I think what we're seeing in the NHL and today it's like the players are more than willing to kind of take like a shorter term deal. Like I think Dubois took like a 3 year deal and then proceeded to take a couple 1 year deals. It's like Matthews took a 5 year deal and his walk to UFA. Like I think that it's becoming way more expensive to buy the UFA years for some teams, and I think that like the prime of players is becoming like primes of players is really lowering in age where like someone was like 30 years old, you'd be like, yeah, that guy's probably still in his prime, like he's still a really great player. It's like I think that like almost like when you're almost 30 now, it's like you're still a great contributor, but like you're probably not playing your most prime hockey in those years. Like your prime's probably coming between when you're like 24 and 28, like that kind of range where Dubois is kind of just entering. It's like I think players are more than willing to bet on themselves for that kind of prime, and then they want to like, and then once that prime's over, they be like want to be like, hey, I did so good in my prime. Give me an 8-year deal when I'm like 30 years old, kind of like Huberdeau, where Huberdeau had a lot of really great years in Florida, and now he's getting paid 10.5 million until he's like 38 years old. So it's like I think players are more than willing to kind of wait till for that long term deal when they know they're probably not going to be worth that giant massive deal if they sign like a like more short term deals then.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. I mean, like it's really has changed because, but you're still also still seeing those like extensions for 8 years for
Yeah.
$8 million. Like we just saw with Montreal and not Suzuki,
Caulfield.
Caulfield. And it's like you can get guys to stick around because like what he's gonna go till he's 30 years old, so he'll be right,
Yeah.
give or take 30
Yeah.
years. Um, I don't know. I just there's some guys that'll stick around. I just don't know if it's just a Canadian market thing or if it's a small market thing or what it is. Because Matthew Tkachuk did his thing asking to leave for Florida, and Matthew's like he's an American, and I assumed that he was going to Arizona. Whatever happens with Arizona, I kind of hope they stick around. But I don't know. It's strange, and I don't know if guys are giving these cities a long enough chance. Like they get in when the team's bad, the team kind of starts to get good. They don't win a cup, and all of a sudden they want out. Like
Yeah.
you know, that's kind of that's the Dubois line of thinking. That's the Matthew Tkachuk. Like Calgary was kind of crappy when he got in there, and now he's gone. And
Yeah.
same thing, yeah. Like really, that whole 2016
16.
draft. The first, who's the fifth guy in that? It's Jesse Puljujarvi, Line.
Olli Levy.
There we go. He didn't do a whole lot.
But then you also saw with Adam Fox is also from that draft, and then he got traded
Oh
to
yeah, to
to Carolina, and then he got ultimately traded to New York because that's the only team he'd signed with. So it's like a lot of players in that 2016 draft. It's like those are the players that are like coming into their prime and just like been their prime. And I think a lot of those players are real like that's kind of like the generation I think that a lot of young players are seeing where like yeah, I can kind of control my destiny a little bit more than just sign like just automatically signing that 8-year deal after my ELC is done. Like I think a lot of those players from that draft are kind of becoming more aware of the options they have and not necessarily having to be like super loyal to your team, but like not that they're not loyal to their team, but like you don't have to sign like an 8-year deal as soon as your ELC is done. Like you can take like a 5-year deal and then like a 4-year deal. Like you don't like not every player has to take that 8-year deal.
yeah. Not everyone has to stay in Winnipeg till the day they die, but and I mean if there's ever a guy that wants to sign here and like get drafted, sign until he retires, I'll take it. I would love to see that happen in Winnipeg as long as the team's willing to be loyal. But I mean, it's just like you and I. Like I've turned down a contract before too, where it's just like I really have no desire to work for that company in radio. I'll go work over here because I know things are going to be better, even though I might be getting paid less or I might not
Yeah.
get as good of a deal. It's just business at this point.
Yeah, and I think that's one thing that's really emerging is we can't forget that hockey is a business overall. And there's like budgets and there's bottom lines and like players are like it's a constantly evolving business where a lot of players are becoming more aware, a lot of businesses are trying new practices. And it's like things aren't going to stay the same forever. Things are going to be different and like we might see this where the UFA age drops in a year or something or like drops to 25 instead of being 26 and it's like a lot like things are up in the air and it's important to innovate, but it's also that we want to make sure that the player and management relationship doesn't get like affected by team like players never wanting to sign like these 8-year deals. But I think that the NHL is in a good spot right now with kind of a balance of players wanting to stay long, like really long term with their teams in these 8-year deals. But then we're also seeing these players that are become like are trying to like particularly plan out what they're trying to do with like Matthews or Dubois in that case.
Mm-hmm. I don't. Do you really think that would be a good idea? To the you said that they would consider dropping the RFA age from
Yeah,
26. Do you think that'd be better for the league, or is that just? I think that's only better for the players. I don't know if that's
yeah.
necessarily good for the league.
I think and if you think of it in a way where you're getting a lot more young players to go to, or kind of like it kind of changes the whole dynamic where you can have a lot more excitement. Like I'm not saying like I obviously don't think that it's something that they should do because it might really affect it might not affect each team evenly since
Mhm.
there's some teams that really rely on having that RFA status and stuff like that. But like driving up that kind of interest of players being like, yeah, I can like you see it with like the NBA and stuff like that. Like those teams, like you have massive trades all the time, and like there's a lot of hype around kind of like what teams can do, and like you can like it's very popular for that reason alone. Like and
But I also think
yeah,
that kind of kills your loyalty to
yeah,
your individual brand. So it's like, yeah, I've got the hottest superstar here, but I'm only going to have him for 4 years. So me as a consumer, like especially with the price of hockey jerseys, I'm not going to be replacing. I'm less likely to go get a name bar on my jersey. I'll go get a blank because I know the jersey is going to be
yeah,
new next year, and I'm not paying to have Dubois, let's be honest,
yeah,
Dubois on the back of my jersey for 2 seasons, and then I've got an out of date jersey. Like I'd just rather have an old blank one. So
yeah,
I think that yeah, and like fans are less connected to the players. It just I think that's a whole mess, and I think that's
yeah,
hurting the NBA in the long run and would hurt the
yeah.
NHL.
I like I don't think that they should do that. Like it's very like the NBA may have a lot of things right in that way, but like the NBA is a completely different league. Like they only
Mhm.
start 5 players on their team, so they have a lot more options for like trading for these massive players because of how important these players have to be because of how important their minutes are. So NHL is a completely different game where it's a more team aspect sport where like one player, like you can have one superstar in the NBA and they make a huge difference, and then you can have one superstar in the NHL, and like you see it with kind of Arizona and Clayton Keller, like you can have a superstar in your team and you can still like he can't carry you like and like like to the playoffs. Like it's a really team oriented sport more than the NBA, and I think that the NHL needs to find a way to evolve where it kind of promotes more team and player relationships, but we don't want to eliminate players from choosing their pathways best for how they want to play their career out.
Also fair. Well, I guess we're solving the world's problems one day at a time there, Ray. Where can we find you on the internet?
Yeah, you can find me at ray.how on Instagram. And if you have any questions that you want to have on the podcast, it'd be greatly appreciated because questions are getting harder and harder by the week. So any questions that you think that would be a great kind of touch point to talk about would be greatly appreciated.
What day's the draft?
I think it's the 28th.
28th. So that's 2 podcasts in there. Do you want to do a fun podcast next week where I just ask you bizarre questions? We don't talk much hockey unless something crazy happens.
Okay.
Okay. Next week's going to be a fun podcast. So stick around for that, friends. I'm Angus Hout. Check me out on Instagram and Twitter. If you see me kicking around at different events here in Winnipeg, I'm gonna be kicking around underneath the big yellow tent. So say hi. Make sure to check out jetsnation.ca, like, subscribe,
Yeah.
and tell your friends about this podcast. Ray, you have yourself a great
Yeah.
week, and go
Go
Jets
Jets,
go.
go.
Make good decisions there, Kevin Cheveldale. I believe in you there, buddy.